Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Arizona Illustrated for Friday, the 20th of July, 2012. I'm Jim Ninsel, host of Political Roundtable, our weekly analysis and commentary on local, state, and national politics. Tonight on the Roundtable, we'll talk about the politics of immigration, examine the latest court battles over abortion rights, and check in with Maricopa County Sheriff Joe Arpaio's hunt for Obama's birth certificate. Joining me this evening is Pima County Democratic Party Chairman Jeff Rogers, Tucson Tea Party founder Trent Humphreys, and Republican strategist Amy Lynn Gordon. Thanks to all of you for being here. Amy Lynn, welcome to the Roundtable for the very first time. Let's start with SB 1070, Arizona's controversial immigration law. Jeff, earlier this week, the American Civil Liberties Union filed yet another court action seeking an injunction to prevent this fourth provision, the so-called Papers, Please provision, from going into effect in Arizona. That was the provision that was actually the Supreme Court, at least for now, upheld that and said that they had to see how that went into effect when they struck down the other three challenged provisions of SB 1070. Can you explain what's going on here from a lawyer's perspective?
Sure. The challenges before the Supreme Court were called a facial challenge, and those facial challenges are something where they say under no circumstances can this be constitutional or legal. And the court backed up away from it on this Section 2B and said, well, we think it's too soon to say that about this. It might be preempted under federal law, but there's not enough evidence right now. And so they sort of let it stand. They didn't really uphold it, but they let it stand. And so most people think that what's going to happen is once they start applying it, there's just no way you can apply it without being discriminatory in your policing. And they also suggested that the stop would have to be for detention would have to be lawful, but then it would have to be only for a reasonable period of time given what the stop was. So for instance, say they stop you for running a red light. Well, they could if they had the suspicion that you were here illegally, they could go back and try to contact ICE or some other federal agency to try to verify that, but there's a limit on how long they can hold you there at the scene of that red light stop. And that's probably 20 to 30 minutes is what other case law has shown in other areas of the law. So, we're looking at a situation, how can they do that? Can they do it without holding you beyond a period of time in which it's an illegal detention? And can they base it on some factors that are not race, not the language you speak, and not the color of your skin? Those are absolutely ruled out, both by the statute and by constitutional law. So, we've got a situation where the ACLU is basically saying there can be no way that you can enforce this without violating the rights of probably Hispanics or other people of color. So this is more of an equal protection challenge, not a federal preemption challenge.
All right. And Trent, what do you see happening next in this?
Well, I mean, again, it all comes down to when you when you get pulled over, first thing that happens, do you have your driver's license? No, I don't have my driver's license. Well, then you've all of a sudden taken a 15-minute traffic stop and turned it into something entirely different. And so different rules apply. I mean, anybody that gets stopped is going to be asked for their license and their registration. If you don't have those things, it's a different stop altogether. And so I don't understand why the same rules would apply to somebody that had their license, that had everything, all their registration in order, as opposed to these people who don't. And that's not, you get asked for your registration and license no matter who you are, no matter what you look like. So to automatically assume that anybody enforcing this is going to be racist, I think is just way beyond the pale. I mean, look, our cops are good people. Our police officers are good people. The people out enforcing the laws, there's a bad apple every once in a while, but these are good people. And to automatically assume they're going to enforce everything racially is just wrong. That needs to stop, honestly.
And Amy Lynn, your thoughts on how this is proceeding?
You mentioned that it's controversial, and it's controversial because we continue to talk about it and we continue to take it to court. But the fact is, Arizonans overwhelmingly support the law. Americans overwhelmingly support the law. Other states are coming up with legislation that mirrors Arizona's legislation, and that's because we have a very porous border. And the violence and the drugs that come across the border are something that Arizonans are no longer willing to stand for. And Obama's not going to secure the border, so we've had to take it upon ourselves. And the Supreme Court has upheld the law. And I just don't think that we need to automatically assume that our police officers are going to do things that like Trent just said, they're not going to do. We already have to show our papers. We need to secure the border, and that's really what this is about.
Jeff?
Well, I think it's going to be very difficult. Even the best of police officers, and I have lots of police officer friends, and are going to have a difficult time with this. I mean, what are you going to base the detention upon? And even if you're cited for driving without a license, you've got to be. They've got to cite you and release you within a reasonable period of time. They can't continue to detain you for other offenses. So it's a difficult quandary for the average police officer out there on the beat. And believe me, most law enforcement agencies are not excited about this. Most professional law enforcement agencies, now setting Joe Arpaio aside, but I wouldn't call him professional, but most of them are not, they're not in favor of this for lots of reasons, but that being one of them. So I guarantee this will be struck down. Whether it will be struck down now in a preemptive fashion, or whether they wait until it is applied and people begin to report how it's being applied, and then another lawsuit is brought. One way or the other, it's not going to see the light of day.
And Amy Lynn, let me ask you about this. There was a Latino decisions poll this week that showed Obama at his highest level ever among Latino voters, up at 70%. And this was in the wake of the SB 1070 decision and Obama announcing his sort of mini DREAM Act implementation. And are Republicans having a problem with reaching out to Latino voters?
I don't think so. I think that the Democrats are trying to change the story. The Democrats are trying to move this debate away from jobs in the economy and a porous border. And it's not going to work. When it comes right down to it, it doesn't matter what color your skin is, if you're male or female. Americans want to go to work. They want the economy to be stabilized. They want more of their freedoms. They want less regulations. That's what this election is going to be about. And I think it makes no difference what color their skin is.
Jeff, do you think the Republicans are having trouble?
They've got a real problem. If we can motivate and turn out the Latino vote, then the Republicans are going to have a great deal of difficulty with Florida, Arizona, Nevada, New Mexico, and Colorado. Those would be 5 states where that vote is pivotal. And if we have a high rate of turnout of Latino vote in those states and these numbers remain as they are, which I believe they will remain as they are, because after all, you have to remember that Romney's advisor on immigration is Chris Kobosh, the father of all of these SB 1070 and its various clones. He's the guy who said he would, and Romney said he would absolutely veto the DREAM Act if Congress passed it for him. And he's suddenly been very quiet about the sort of mini DREAM Act that you talked about that Obama issued by executive order. So I don't think that Latinos are in any way going to join the Republican bandwagon anytime soon.
And Trent, a problem with Republican outreach to Latinos?
I don't think so. I mean, it was always around 65 to 70% anyway. Which means that if take 3 Hispanics, 2 of them are going to vote for Obama, 1's going to vote for Romney. I mean, that's pretty much where we've been, and I think that's pretty much what we're going to get for this cycle. And I think the only states where the Hispanic vote's going to really could be a deciding factor is probably Colorado, and because Arizona is going to be out of reach for the president. Let's just be honest. And Florida will probably be that way too, and maybe New Mexico. Colorado and New Mexico, I think, are the 2 states where that may come into play, and I don't think it'll be that big of a game changer in those 2 states even.
And as long as we're talking about illegal immigration, Sheriff Joe Arpaio was going on trial this week in a civil lawsuit regarding racial profiling, some of his crime sweeps that he's had up in Maricopa County. How do you think that one's going to play out?
Well, I mean, I looked at the case. Obviously, I wasn't at the hearing, and I heard some of the evidence produced that, from letters that people wrote to the sheriff, and saying that, look, we have things going on here. Some of them were off color, but that doesn't necessarily tie the sheriff into enforcing those or having those letters coming back from the sheriff to those people. So I think it was really thin gruel that they used. Look, the whole thing about this is just what Jeff said. We're trying to prove that our law enforcement it can't do anything but be racist, and I think this is the opening shot in that battle. And I always give the law enforcement the benefit of the doubt. I don't think they're racist. I think that they apply the law equally, and I see the statistician they brought out there, and he brought some statistics, and there's a bunch of statistics could have been brought up that go the other way, but of course he's not going to bring those up. And there's lies, there's damnable lies, and there's statistics. So I think this whole thing is just thin gruel. I don't think that in this particular instance that Sheriff Arpaio's in any trouble from this investigation, at least legally. Now, politically, I can't answer that.
And this may be a precursor to the federal efforts as well, the Justice Department investigation of Arpaio as well.
Absolutely, and I think the key to this is going to be when Joe Arpaio takes the stand on Tuesday. And I will tell you, I think Joe Arpaio is a racist. I just absolutely think there's no doubt in my mind he is. That doesn't mean the people working for him are, but he's the head man there, and he's the man who gives the orders on what's going to be done, and that there's going to be sweeps or there's going to be stops that are for maybe other reasons or made-up reasons so that they can try to attempt to enforce immigration law. So I think that it's not an easy case for the plaintiffs to make here. They have to prove that there was a discriminatory intent and purpose during these stops, and that there was a discriminatory effect. Well, the discriminatory effect is very easy to show because we can see that it had an effect of discriminating against Hispanics. The other part is going to have to come from Joe Arpaio's minds, emails, letters, discussions of staff. There's going to be a lot of testimony from a lot of people about what was going on inside that department when they were making these decisions. And I think it'll be fascinating to see it roll out over the next 2 weeks.
And Amy Lynn, just a few days before this trial began, Sheriff Joe had a press conference with his cold case posse on the birth certificate question and whether or not Obama was actually born in the United States. And Sheriff Joe says that this birth certificate that Obama has produced is a fake. Your thoughts on what Sheriff Joe's doing here?
I think it's time to stop talking about that, actually. I think that it's been proven the birth certificate's real. President Obama is a citizen, and since he's stopped his investigation. I do want to speak to the case. Like Trent said, I think it's going to be a tough climb for them. At the end of the day, this didn't just happen, and the people of Maricopa County continue to vote overwhelmingly to reelect Joe Arpaio. And the Democrats are going to have their chance to unseat him, but he's got $7 million and a lot of people who think that he is the only one who's going to be tough on crime the way that they want him to.
And a three-way race up there as well. He's got not only a Democratic opponent, but an independent as well, which could lead to all kinds of dynamics.
It could, but I think that Sheriff Joe has proven that what he's doing is what the voters want. And it's going to be up to them ultimately, and we'll see it in November, but I think he's probably in a safe place with them.
Trent, the birth certificate, any reason to believe that Arpaio's onto something here?
Look, I mean, we have the chance to throw Obama out of office once and for all in November. I think we need to focus on that, stick to that, and I think our case is good. I mean, he's done nothing to help improve the lives of American people over the past 4 years. He's done nothing but be divisive and play people off one another over race, over class, over everything else. I think that in order for America to be what it can be, we need to dump him overboard and put in President Romney.
And Jeff, the birth certificate issue, a distraction?
I was really proud of John McCain this week when he called out Michelle Bachmann and Trent Franks over the nastiness, the things they've been doing that are reminiscent of Joe McCarthyism from the 1950s as regards Clinton's, one of her chief aides at the Secretary of State's office. I'd like to see other Republicans in this state speak out against Joe Arpaio and this craziness about this birther issue and wasting tax dollars by sending deputies for 9 days over to Hawaii. I mean, this is absolutely ridiculous. I will say to the press's credit, most of them have ignored this last incident. It's not getting much traction. It's finally kind of dying off, but I do think it's incumbent upon Republicans in this state to call him out and say, get off that. It's ridiculous. It's idiotic. I'd like to see more people saying what we're hearing here, that this is not an issue anymore.
And by the same token, I would invite Jeff Rogers to stand up to the Obama administration, who's been making the claim that Mitt Romney is a felon. Because
he might be a felon.
There you go.
The Boston Globe today just released another story with additional proof that he was still in charge of Bain Capital as of 2002. So he's 3 years past when he said he was. So yeah, it's probably the statute of limitations has expired and he can't be charged. But that doesn't mean lying to the SEC or lying to the voters either one is a good thing to be doing.
The Boston Globe arbiter of fairness when it comes to Mitt Romney.
All right. We've got a couple of lawsuits brewing on Arizona's abortion laws recently passed by the Arizona legislature. One of them challenges whether or not federal dollars that flow through the state can then go to Planned Parenthood to provide health treatments for other women's health issues such as cancer screenings or STD treatments. Jeff, your thoughts on where this one is?
Well, I think the two lawsuits that are out there right now, underline why this election is so important. Right now there are 4 votes on the Supreme Court to reverse Roe v. Wade. And, and Justice Kennedy, we don't know, but the last opinion that he authored in the early 90s, in a Pennsylvania case, he upheld the right to an abortion. And so I think that it's a very tenuous situation. And one of the biggest issues of this election is women's reproductive health rights. And the war on women that we've seen waged by Republicans in the past 6 months has been shocking. And these new cases underline that. The one case is Planned Parenthood they receive access dollars, which are federal Medicaid dollars. And in 2 states already, they have said that it's illegal to withdraw those funds from Planned Parenthood. That's in Texas, and in Indiana there are injunctions right now against a very similar law. So I think the law here, which basically tries to take away money for the things you said, family planning, cancer screenings, and other women's health treatments, that those things are part of Medicaid, and Medicaid forbids the states from denying those funds for those things. So I think that we'll prevail on that issue, but it just goes to show you how important this election is.
And there's a second lawsuit that involves limiting abortions after 20 weeks, and I think that one might be setting up a challenge to Roe v. Wade.
Yeah, the author of that bill in the state legislature said that was his intent. Arizona is a little more draconian than the ones in the other states because it goes back and tries to figure out this 20-week period starts the last time a woman had a period instead of after fertilization. And the Supreme Court was very clear in Roe v. Wade and the Casey decision I just mentioned by Justice Kennedy that you cannot interfere with a woman's right to an abortion until the 3rd trimester, and that would be approximately the 24-week mark in a pregnancy. So they've been very clear about that, and I think that the current court will probably uphold that, but we could see some vast changes in this court in the next couple of years.
And Amy Lynn, Jeff just mentioned the so-called Republican war on women, so I want to give you a chance to speak up on this.
Well, I appreciate him battling for my reproductive rights. However, I think that it's safe to say that Americans appreciate reasonable restrictions on abortions. And fair and square Planned Parenthood, they are abortion clinics. And there are a lot of other places you can go to have cancer screenings, to get birth control, any type of gynecological exams that you need. There are other options. Planned Parenthood isn't the only option. So I think that Americans will agree that it is reasonable that their tax dollars don't go to fund abortion clinics, particularly when we're having to cut education, cut healthcare in other places, when people don't have jobs. I think this is sort of a stretch, but I do understand and I do agree that this is absolutely why it is so important. This election is so important. Those Supreme Court seats are critical, and I think that if we want to ensure that we do have reasonable restrictions on abortions, we've got to make sure that we elect the right guy to be the president.
And Trent, your thoughts on these two new restrictions?
I think the whole restriction, it goes into the big evil of everything. Look, the government needs to get out of the business of funding private companies. That just has to happen. It has to happen with Planned Parenthood. It has to happen with Solyndra. It has to happen with all these cronyist things with their hands out trying to grab money from the government.
We're talking about healthcare clinics
everything.
In the case of help low-income people.
Look, that should be left to the states. States should get block grant money, and then the state should be able to handle that in the way the state feels it should happen. The federal government is just involved in way, way too many things, and it needs to stop. We need to cut back. We need to cut back the federal government's involvement in all of our lives, in every aspect. And we talk about war on women. Look, what about the war on our young people who's going to inherit this Leviathan government that just wants more and more and more from them? At what point do we spend 20% of our GDP on government, 30%, 40%? When's enough? It needs to stop, and we need to stop giving public funds, things that you and I go out and work hard. People work overtime. This money is given, and it's not built by the government. It's built by individuals. And this money is given to the government, and people in the government feel like they're free to hand it out like it's candy. That has to stop. And if it has to stop Planned Parenthood, we'll find other ways to make sure people are taken care of.
Absolutely.
The nub of this issue is that it interferes with a woman's choice of her health care provider. And if the funds are going to be available and you're going to tell a woman that she can't choose this health care provider, she can only choose amongst these that have been selected by the state instead of all of the ones that are available to accept that federal funding. So, I'm on the side of the woman getting the choice to decide for herself. I think I trust that women can do that and will do that, and it's none of our business.
And expanding government to be in everybody's business.
All right. I want to talk about some of our local county races here in southern Arizona. I had a story this week in the Tucson Weekly about a group called Arizonans for a Brighter Future, which is a nonprofit organization that has recently formed, and the backers are declining to come forward and reveal who they are. And they made some charges about $345 million missing in the county transportation budget. Trent, do you know anything about this group or who they are or the allegations that they're making? Or
I haven't even heard of the allegations. I do know that there's problems the way we run the county, there are, let's say there are visibility issues of where money's going. Now, I don't know if this is true or not, but I mean, I think that obviously we need to change there. We need open, transparent, and there's a lot of debt involved with our county too. So I think that we could run things better. I think that we do need a change on that board, but I don't know anything about this group or what they're trying to talk about.
Jeff,
I wouldn't be surprised that if you drill down pretty far, that maybe not the creators of this group, but the money for it is coming from Rosemont Copper. I mean, Rosemont Copper is going to make this election about the Republican Rosemont mine. So I wouldn't be surprised if somebody like that isn't in back of it. But no, I haven't been able to figure out what's going on. But the allegations they make are completely specious. So it's it's very difficult to know who's behind something when they won't reveal themselves.
And I did actually ask Rod Pace if Rosemont was involved in funding this group, and he said Rod Pace of Rosemont Copper, and he said no. But it does appear as though people from Rosemont Copper are getting a little bit more involved in our local races.
Absolutely.
They seem to be involved, particularly in this race in District 5 or District 4, where Ray Carroll, supervisor, who has been leading the opposition to the Rosemont mine, a Republican, has drawn an opponent in Sean Collins. Trent, what's your sense of how that Rosemont issue is playing in that race?
I don't think that Mr. Collins is going to come out prevail in that race. I mean, people still don't know who he is, and early voting starts in 2 weeks. And so I just don't see. I mean, everybody knows Ray Carroll. I mean, if you like him or not, you know who he is, you know what he's about, and you know that he's been for most cases a reliable conservative voice on that council that's been just dominated by a liberal philosophy.
So you don't see Ray as being in trouble in this Republican
not
primary?
this time. I mean, I think Ray needs to start paying more attention a little bit. But I don't think if he is going to get beat, I don't think Mr. Collins is the person to do it.
And Jeff, any sense of what's happening?
Well, I was surprised that the Republicans put up a candidate against Ray. I mean, he's obviously on the other side of the fence from me, but he's a man of the absolute highest integrity and somebody we should have more Republicans like him, on the board and in the legislature. He's an honorable man, and I think it's wrong for them Rosemont to attack him, but I think that's where the money's coming from, and that's why he's being attacked. But yet you must understand that he's representing the wishes of his district when it comes to Rosemont, because Republicans, Democrats, it's very unpopular in his district because the mine is in his district. And I spoke to some retirees in Green Valley, many of whom were Republicans, and I could see that that they're even going to vote for some Democrats this year because of Rosemont mine.
And you mentioned earlier John McCain on the U.S. Senate floor denouncing a letter sent by Michelle Bachmann and Congressman Trent Franks of Arizona, who were talking about whether or not an aide to Hilary Clinton was a agent for the Muslim Brotherhood. Let's take a look at that clip.
To say that the accusations made in both documents are not substantiated by the evidence they offer is to be overly polite and diplomatic about it. It is far better and more accurate to talk straight. These allegations about Huma Ahmadine and the report from which they are drawn are nothing less than an unwarranted and unfounded attack on an honorable citizen, a dedicated American, and a loyal public servant.
Trent, is John McCain doing the right thing in that speech?
Well, John McCain does what John McCain wants whenever he wants. That's the good and the bad about John McCain. But look, we don't need this right now. I mean, there's a clear choice. We have things in motion. There's an election coming up. if you were going to do this investigation, if you were going to bring up evidence, now's not the time. Like I say, if you don't like the way that the Obama administration is being run, you have the chance to throw him out of office. It's coming up quick. And things like this just kind of muddy the water to a point where we give people like Jeff Rogers time to talk about something else besides the economy. And I don't think we should do that, ever.
Amy Lynn, McCain doing the right thing here?
I think that I do. I think that he did the right thing. I think that, like Trent said, this is not what we need to be talking about. It's a distraction from the unemployment rate. It's a distraction from healthcare, and the people will absolutely have an opportunity to change the guy that's at the top. And I believe they're going to do the right thing because they've been pushed to the limit.
And Jeff, you already said that you think
this was a sort of have you no decency moment for John McCain from the line in the 50s during the McCarthy hearings. Every now and then John McCain really does get it right. This is the guy I kind of liked about 15 or 20 years ago until he slipped into the mainstream Republican Party.
All right, we got less than a minute left, but Amy Lynn, last week on the show we talked a little bit about the Republican primary in the Senate race, and this week both Senators Kyle and McCain said they were worried that the tone of that was going to damage the eventual nominee. Do you think they have a point there?
I think that overall primaries are good for the system. Ideally, we wouldn't have any, and we would know who we were going to have in the general from the very beginning. It's not the way that it works. I think that Will Cardin has every right to run. He's using his own money, and I think that the Republicans going to come out in the end because the message is going to be clear: jobs and the economy.
We're going to have to wrap it up there, which means no discussion of the 4th Avenue hot dog carts, unfortunately. But you can learn more about what's going on in local politics by visiting azpm.org/yourvote. And while you're on the website, we'd love to hear your thoughts about tonight's program, so be sure to leave us a comment. To find out the latest from AZPM, follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Stay tuned next for the News Hour, and then at 8:30, tune into Arizona Week for an in-depth look at the campaign finance reports in Arizona's federal races. On Monday, Arizona Illustrated brings you a special forum with the Republican candidates in Southern Arizona's new Congressional District 2. I'm Jim Ninsel. Thanks for watching, and have a great weekend.